Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. If you don't know me, my name is Barrie. That's pretty simple. This TNT is going to be about lab-grown meat. Kind of came across this topic randomly while I was procrastinating doing some work for some class. I don't know. And I thought it looked interesting, and I thought about it a bit, like, would this be kosher? And I thought it would make an interesting TNT topic, so I proposed the idea to Hannah, and she said yes, so thank you. So the way I kind of structured the source sheet is I thought about the problems that lab-grown meat, like, would present kosher-wise, and I've divided it up into 4 sections for time's sake. And it does say in here, but for the purposes of this discussion, we're going to be talking about lab-grown beef because that's kind of what science is leaning towards now to, like, get quickest to consumers. So if anyone would like to read the background. Hannah, there you go.
Background. Research into lab-grown meat was first initiated by Willem van Eeuwen in 1997, who was given a grant by the Dutch government to try to develop his idea of lab-grown meat. Mark Post took over the project in 2008, and in 2013, he debuted a lab-grown burger on television in England. Since then, multiple companies like Memphis Meats in the U.S. and Olive Farms in Israel have been working on lab-grown meat product to bring to consumers in stores.
Anyone would like to read the very simplified scientific process? Carrie.
Very simplified process. Cells are extracted from a live animal and are placed in an animal-based serum made up of salts, proteins, fats, sugars, and vitamins to mimic the environment of a live animal. Scaffolding, a structure that provides support, is used to create a uniform of connective tissue, fat, and muscle. This eventually grows to become a form of meat.
So that's the very, very simplified scientific process. That could be like a whole lecture in itself, but for time's sake, I kind of boiled it down. Basically, scientists take cells from an animal, they put it in this like serum liquid, they grow it in a lab, and in about like 2 to 6 months, it becomes lots of something that looks like meat. So the first problem that's posed by this lab-grown meat is, are the cells derived from a kosher animal? So would anyone like to read source 1? Okay, Alana.
The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying to them, "Speak to the Israelite people thus. These are the creatures that you may eat from among all the land animals. Any animal that has true hoofs, with clefts through the hoofs, and that chews the cud, such you may eat."
So, as I said, for the purposes of this discussion, I'm going to be focusing on lab-grown beef. So, since cows fit into that category, that's all okay, so no problems so far. And the rest of this parak does go on to talk about what other animals and, like, poultry and fish are kosher, but we're focusing on beef for now. So, it's kind of past the first checkpoint, I guess, is if it's beef, it comes from a kosher animal, so all good. The second one is, does it violate Ever Min HaChai, taking a limb from a live animal? And that has 2 sources, so would anyone like to read the first one of that? Michael.
You shall be holy people to me. You must not eat flesh torn by beasts in the field. You shall cast it to the dogs.
So the next source is Sefer HaChinuch, which is a book of explaining all the mitzvot, and would anyone like to read part 1 of that?
Could you explain the relevance of this pasuk to Ever Min HaChai?
So this pasuk here in Shemot is where Ever Min HaChai comes from, because it's saying you must not eat flesh torn by beasts, so you can't just like walk up to an animal in the field, cut a part of it off, and eat it.
But you wouldn't be a beast if you were doing that.
I don't get your question. Like, I don't. Maybe it's just like not connecting. I don't know.
I've been doing a lot of that tonight, sorry.
What?
I've been doing a lot of that tonight, sorry.
Maybe it's all the back.
You warned me ahead. Maybe it's the lack of a coat.
He's trying to coat.
Lots of good hypotheses.
Sorry for that roast.
Yeah, you're wearing a coat. Yeah. He's wearing a coat.
It's like a windbreaker.
So maybe
Never mind. That's off topic. I'm never gonna meet teacher one day. So,
No, it's not.
John. So I'll try to explain this, but this is where the commandment of Ever Minachai comes from. You can't take a limb from a live animal, and then the Sefer Chinuch explains further. If you would like to read.
I have a question on that.
Yes.
So what exactly is the prohibition? Like, you can't just chop off its leg and then
Basically,
eat the leg.
so it connects to section 3, which talks about how you have to slaughter the animal in order to be able to eat it. But basically, so as I said, Ever Minachai is you can't just walk into a field, be like, hey, I want to eat some goat now, chop off the leg of a goat, and go cook it. That's what it's mainly talking about, which then we'll read later about how you have to slaughter the animal in order to be able to eat it. So would anyone like to read Sefer Chinuch?
Me.
Okay, Joey, take it away, part 1.
Do not eat a limb from the living. Is it that?
Yes.
That we were prevented that we would not eat a limb from the living, meaning to say, a limb that we cut from an animal when it is still alive. And about this, it stated, and you shall not eat the soul. And you shall not eat the soul with the meat. And so they did say. So they say.
I didn't write the translation, blame Safaria.
I knew I
Blame Safaria.
Okay.
I love Safaria.
You shall not eat the soul with the meat, and that is a limb from the living. And we say in Tractate Chulin 102b, one who ate a limb from the living and meat from the living is lashed twice. Since there are 2 negative commandments about it, the one which we mention and the second is and flesh torn in the field shall you not eat, which is a negative commandment about the one that eats meat from the living, as I have written in the commandment not to eat a torn animal. And the warning for the limb from the living was repeated in another place in Parshat Noach, as it is stated, the meat with the soul, its blood, you shall not eat.
Okay, so thank you, Joey.
Sure.
Once again, that explains that you can't take a limb from a live animal.
Wait, can I?
Yes.
I have to apologize. I wasn't paying complete attention. But
I noticed.
So if you just want to move on, I totally understand.
No, it's okay. Any questions are always welcome.
So what is defined as a limb? Like, if I chop off an arm, is that that's clearly a limb? But what if I just cut off part of a pinky? Is that not?
But it doesn't have a pinky.
Oh.
But what if I take a nail?
What do you feel part of
I don't know how animals work.
What about an eyebrow?
Yeah, thank you, an eyebrow. Thank you.
Well, that would be hair.
Are we not allowed to eat hair? People eat cheek.
Anything? Yeah, cheek.
Tongue. What about tongue?
Tongue. Yeah, thank you.
Tongue. I think tongue is a limb.
This is where
What if it's only part of it?
tongue doesn't grow back. Comes a tongue, sticks out, moves on its own, he's calling it a limb.
Well, I don't speak with thumb movements, but so there's all great questions. Maybe we should have read section 3 first. But so as we will go into section 3 next, hopefully quickly because you all have questions about it. In order to be able to eat the animal, you have to kill it. So obviously, if you're eating kosher tongue, the animal has been killed first, so that's not a problem. But from what I've researched into making the source sheet, any whether it's you're cutting off an actual leg of an animal or you're slicing off their cheek, as someone mentioned, I don't know what you're doing. That's not allowed. You can't just wander into the field being I don't know, I want some goat cheek and just cut it off and cook it and go eat it however you may cook it. So I think we're gonna skip.
We take a little break.
We're
We're
gonna
gonna
take
take
a
a 2-minute break so you guys can deliberate on the Avermina situation.
Everyone can get their like silly bag. Let me
So, the next source is Kuleen 102b. Would anyone like to read that? I'll read it. Oh, did someone volunteer?
I can read.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, did you want to read?
No. You can read the next one. Page 3.
The Gemara discusses the source of the prohibition of eating a limb from a living animal. Rabbi Yochanan says, "You shall not eat the life with the flesh." This is the source of the prohibition of eating a limb from a living animal. And the verse, "And you shall not eat any flesh that is torn in the field." This is the source for the prohibition of eating flesh severed from the living and flesh severed from a treifa, even if it is not an entire limb.
So, therefore, something like if you cut a cheek off live animal or a tongue off live animal, that would. What? Were you raising your hand?
No.
Okay.
It's like on Jeopardy, before you finish your question, your buzz ends, but you still have to ask the question again.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever. So therefore, like taking tongue or cheek, that would qualify as one of these things. So, so the way the process of growing meat in a lab works is scientists take cells from a live animal. So,
That's awesome.
yeah, it doesn't work if it's from a dead animal because it just scientifically doesn't work. I'm not a scientist. Cells are dead, right? So cells are derived from a living animal, and in the research that I was doing to like the background of this and like how it's done, like who's doing it. So the reason that a lot of scientists are trying to develop this and like bring it to market quickly is one of the main reasons is the environmental factor, because livestock takes up a lot of water, it takes up a lot of land, it takes up a lot of resources, and it has a big impact on the environment. I think it was 15% of all methane emissions are emitted by cows. And so what scientists really want to do is make a more sustainable form of meat, and this is kind of the answer that they're moving towards. And all the things that I read about it and like the videos I watched and the articles and things say that a lot of these animals that they have taken cells from are still alive and are still roaming out there. So it is taking something from a live animal that you are going to eat. So therefore it would violate one of these two things, if not both. Comments, questions, thoughts? Yes, Hannah.
Does this intersect at all with the debate about, I mean, actually I don't know if it's a debate, I just assume it is, about like using human stem cells? Because like the idea sounds kind of similar, like.
So the idea is very similar, that they use a variety of cells to grow this meat, and one of those cells are stem cells. Mm-hmm. And actually a lot of the technology that scientists are using to grow this meat is similar to what scientists are doing, researching in like organ reproduction and things like that.
That's really cool.
Malka, you had a question?
I feel like the synthetic meat, like honestly, is a great idea, and I think it would really improve the environment. It sounds like it would, PR well to everyone. So like, do you think that synthetic meat is like going to become the norm soon, and then because we can't eat it, we'll be like, like shamed for like still doing the old ways of like, slaughtering and like ruining the environment?
So, my personal opinion on whether it's going to become the norm soon. So there currently is not a product available to the public that is synthetic grown meat. People have eaten it and it's safe to eat. I think that probably at one point this form of meat research is also being done into like synthetic forms of like poultry and synthetic forms of fish. One day may eventually become the norm, because there are some species like fish are being like overfished, or like cows in some places are just having such a detrimental impact on the environment that like, is it really worth it to have to grow like this meat in a lab, which takes less time because cows have to be of a certain size to make it worth it to kill them. Mm-hmm. So I think maybe one day it will become the normal form of meat. I don't think animal slaughter, whether it be kosher shechting or, non-kosher meat, will be, phased out anytime very soon. But that does bring up an interesting point that if, one day in the future, if it's no one really eats slaughtered meat anymore, and those who want to eat kosher meat don't really have an option, I don't really know. That's really interesting. What thought of that?
The one idea I have about this that possibly we could circumvent the prohibition is I feel like with a lot of prohibitions, in order to actually get a punishment, or actually for a punishment to be applicable, you need to have a certain amount eaten.
Mm-hmm.
So with Yom Kippur, there's an argument on how much you can eat how much you have to eat in order for you to be punished, and even if you're not punished, it's still not ideal, but you don't actually get the exact punishment.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if maybe with cells, if there's under a certain amount that's torn from, or a amount of flesh that's taken, maybe it's under the prohibition level.
So, I'll get to you in a minute. So, that, I would say, you probably could maybe find a loophole around that. I don't know, I'm not a halakhic authority. But the thing is that when scientists extract these cells, they're intending to find cells that will replicate, and they use the scaffolding and they use cell lines to try and grow these cells that will become something that as closely replicates a piece of meat, the muscle and fat and connective tissue. So when I originally thought about putting this section in, I'm just well, does it really count? How much are you taking from the animal? Is it really taking something from an animal? And then I thought, well, the 6 cells or more that they take from an animal, that doesn't really seem like a whole lot. It's very small, but you're intentionally using it to make more of it. Mm-hmm. So I would think that you're eating more than the amount would be. You're not eating that little sample of cells that they take from the animal. So I think this can. You have a question?
Something to respond to that, what I was telling you before. 2 things. What I've learned is, when you think about marshmallows, non-kosher marshmallows, they use the pig gelatin, and some people say that the gelatin, because it's so no longer pig anymore, that it's kosher because there's really no trace of the pig, but they say that it's not kosher because that one molecule or whatever, it needed to be from a pig in order to make the gelatin. Mm-hmm. So crucial. So this one molecule, even though it's so small, it's inherent in the creation. And also, I think it's if it's bitzel b'shishim, so it's nullified in a 60th, then it's only after the fact. If you add milk to cholent, if it spills into it, little amount, you can still technically eat it, but you can't add a little bit of milk while you're making cholent beforehand. Yeah. So it's sort of that.
Interesting.
Come to the
Oh, whoops! A little heavy cream and cholent would probably be good.
Almond milk.
More of a cream soup.
Is that a technical note?
Yeah.
Would this synthetic meat technically be vegetarian?
No.
Because it's only cells. It's not necessarily
What's your what do you constitute as vegetarian?
That's what I don't know. Is it considered
If you're vegetarian for against animal cruelty, then
okay,
that,
but
that really
that's what I'm saying.
but if you're vegetarian because the thought of eating an animal kind of grosses you out, then
I see.
Do vegetarians eat kosher marshmallows?
No, but would you on the packaging would it technically say
Every answer.
So they don't. So that's the same thing.
So I'm vegetarian, and
I don't know why I did that. Sorry.
And
You're vegetarian?
yeah.
What did you say?
Thanksgiving. So I don't eat if you walk into a kosher grocery store, the marshmallows that they generally have there do have fish gelatin, and since I don't eat fish, I won't eat those marshmallows. But Trader Joe's does sell vegan marshmallows. They're really good. So, in my opinion, when lab-grown meat, like, comes to the market, even if there was some way that it would be kosher, I personally would not eat it. I can't speak for everyone who's vegetarian or pescatarian or vegan or whatever else is out there.
We're gonna make a new Atarian for it.
Syntheticarian.
Joey, that could be your job.
Joey can work on the title.
Yeah, I'll brainstorm. Next TNT,
Let's workshop this.
Yeah.
I can send you the link with the contact info for these companies.
Yeah, I'll get in touch.
Okay. I think you had your hand up first.
So something I'm just curious about,
Yeah.
like it's not totally relevant to this, but like
Whatever.
it's pretty relevant.
better.
Like strict is there a disagreement amongst vegetarians as to whether you can use fish resin for? I don't know why you're laughing so hard.
She just said she doesn't want to speak for all vegetarians.
I can give you my opinion. It's okay.
I'm kidding, Jason. Please. Barry is great. Let her talk.
Well, what do you mean it's not worrying about?
Okay, wait.
Independent
Jason,
making independent choices.
Jason
I
can
would
share.
without my question. It's not relevant.
Fine. We'll move on to.
You can talk about it later.
Question.
Yeah.
There is the midrash in the Gemara that Moshe was able to serve meat with milk because the meat he got was from God, as in like it wasn't real meat, and which seems kind of relevant to this. It was, no, like it fell from the sky. Like it didn't come from an animal. It fell from the sky.
So I did read that while researching. I chose not to put it in. Information on that.
It does count as not meat if you can have it with milk.
Okay, but also, when Noah was alive, kashrut didn't, like, there was not Torah yet, so what we think of as, like, the laws of kashrut, which are direct from the Torah, didn't exist. Does that not answer your question?
I'm not saying that Avram kept kosher necessarily.
okay.
I'm saying the midrash justifies Avram's kashrut by saying his meat wasn't meat. It was divine meat, which is allowed to be had with milk because it didn't come from an animal.
Interesting.
But this does come from an animal.
This does come from an animal.
Why would you not halakhically come from an animal?
It's meat.
Okay.
It's made off derived from meat.
What? It is birthed by an animal. Where do you think the cell?
No, it's made of plant
That's
protein.
made of plant. Different thing.
The Impossible Burger.
That's not real meat.
I've had it before.
Apparently it's amazing.
It's not good. I don't like it.
Okay.
I don't like it. No, just
John,
taste like lunch meat.
to try and answer your question, what you asked was a question. Since this, if God ever opens a grocery store, I'll be happy to go shopping there. But until then, we're kind of.
Sticker like that.
I felt but until then, we're kind of stuck with this. That does bring up an interesting point, but what we're dealing with now and like what people will be dealing with soon is not divine. It's from a cow. So I don't think this lab-grown meat is the same as what you're talking about, but that is a very interesting point.
I mean,
You have hesitated first.
Well, I'll defend John first and I'll ask my question.
Okay.
The point isn't that it's divine meat, the point is that it's not real meat.
Okay,
It's
so
not what it is, it's more what it isn't.
There was no chai that the Eber or Basar was taken from.
Exactly.
Yeah, there was.
It was created as meat.
Okay, but
The cells.
It was no, but like
This is meat, huh?
can I ask that question?
yes, ask your question.
Is the method of cell extraction an issue because is that humane? It even goes on the note of vegetarianism. How do they extract cells from a live animal?
So basically what they do is, it's like how in medicine they do biopsies. It's like you basically stick a needle into the animal into certain parts where you want the fat, with muscles or connective tissue. They also do it with stem cells and bone marrow sometimes. A bunch of methods have been discovered, and you take those cells. It's not a tremendous amount, and you do your whole scientific process. I'm not a scientist.
So sticking a needle in?
Yes,
It's
you are
pulling a
taking
syringe out.
something from a live animal.
I'm sure the animals are also in some kind of they're not they're animals just running in the field. They're sticking a needle in. They're probably also animals that are
Tranquilized.
they're the animals are probably not treated.
Anesthetized.
think so?
Yeah, they're probably not.
I don't know, they're probably not.
Very much scared of avian.
No, I'm not saying they're tranquilized, but I'm saying like it's lab cows. They're not cows that are living in the field and like eating natural.
No, scientists probably haven't just walked up to some random cow and been like, "Hey, you, come here."
It's a cow that's being stuck in the lab. It's still inhumane. Yeah, it's
Okay, Joey. Okay, never mind, Shelly.
Does that mean that you can make like a ton of synthetic meat from like one cow?
Yes.
So you could just take like.
You could honestly
One cell.
have like a few very small amount of cows and make a whole lot of meat from that. And a lot of animals that scientists use to like experiment on this, the animals are still alive, and that is kind of one of the points of that, is that you don't have to kill a bunch of animals, because it takes a long time for an animal to grow to the size to kill it to get like enough meat out of it that it's worth it. And with this method, you could really just have 2 cows that just supply a lot of meat for everyone.
Okay. Also, are the biopsies capable of the animals?
So I actually couldn't find anything on that.
There's no article written
I
on cow.
have one.
No. What?
Like, why wouldn't you eat the? If it was kosher, why wouldn't you eat it?
Because it comes from an animal. Like going back to Miriam's example of the gelatin in a marshmallow. So once again, I don't speak for all vegetarians, but even like kosher brand marshmallows have fish gelatin in them. And since I don't eat fish, even though it's like you can't recognize it as fish anymore, I don't eat it. So like to me, I wouldn't eat it, even though it's like those little bit of cells. But also those little bit of cells form something that looks like meat, it tastes like meat. Currently, it's basically just like ground beef. The olive farms in Israel are working on like a full-fledged steak, and they have like developed like little pieces of it. But to me, I wouldn't eat it, even if it's just like those pieces. Carrie.
What I'm thinking is that I feel like as this process evolves and we learn more and more about how this is all working, I feel like since Jews are fairly intelligent people, we're going to figure out a way to get past this. And I feel like maybe there's a way that we can like chef at the exact same moment that we extract the cells. So they're like kind of still alive, but the animal's not alive. And then if we get one kosher thing like that, then we'll just let it grow forever, and then we'll all have meat.
Trademarking, that's it. $1 billion in 5 years, guys. That's it.
I'm sure Rabbi will give a head there in 2 seconds.
One of those muncie rabbis.
So,
Chef Traction.
okay, so Carrie and Joey are gonna like take over the kosher meat world one day. Whoever like takes over JLIC in like, I don't know, like 20 years is gonna have to get the meat from them.
Yeah.
Her name's Amalia Weiss.
In 20 years.
Yeah.
She's gonna be. She's married in a Remington. Okay.
Goals.
I have a lot of faith in Amalia, okay? Great things.
So, your point is very valid. Since most people who have experimented with this are not kosher oriented, I don't think they've tried to go in that direction. But maybe one day.
We're Jews. We will.
You know, this company, Olive Farms, is run by Jews, so maybe they're going there.
I'll let them know.
But what? Because Israel's big on technology, and this is where the company is. It started as like a tech startup, and now it's this big thing. So your point is very valid, but one of the big like positives of having this lab grown meat is that you basically have very little need to kill an animal, and you know you can only grow so much meat from so many cells. So if like every time you need X amount of meat you have to kill a cow, it's in some way it's counterproductive.
Exactly. So I'm thinking if we can get just like a couple, or even if you can extract like from multiple places in one animal, like I'm thinking that it might not be like as environmentally friendly and as beneficial as a non-kosher way to do this, but it would make it kosher and it would help like the earth.
Be better.
It would be
Your idea is very valid. Thank you. I'll put you in touch with these people. I'll send you the link.
Opening up a chef extraction business.
Okay, I have a question
Yes.
that I think is for the group also. So we know that, like, I know I was vegetarian and a vegan for a while, and yeah, that's right, not anymore. And every time I would, like, when I was a vegan when I was in Israel, so always I would be staying at these, like, people's houses, and they would be like, you have to eat meat, it's a mitzvah, like, it's not Shabbos if you're not eating meat. My question is, like, would this satisfy, like simcha b'basar v'yayin? Like, would it satisfy those requirements? If it, like,
no.
Sorry, actually, it depends what it tastes like. Like, the whole point is that everyone, there's a certain enjoyment you get out of basar v'yayin. So if this tastes like real meat and you're getting the same enjoyment you would out of basar v'yayin, then I would say yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Gabe.
Sorry,
It's okay.
That's why I don't think it's vegetarian.
I mean, so I was like never brought up with that idea that in order to have like Shabbat and like order to fulfill the mitzvah of Shabbat or Yom Tov, you have to eat meat. Like that's just not what I was brought up with. That's just not what my family does. But to those, I do know people who like to them it is not. You know, even on Shavuot, when it's like tradition to eat dairy, like it's not like Yom Tov to them until they eat meat. So if, you know, the chef traction business takes off and you can get a kosher form of this, I guess it would fulfill what those people are after. Samson.
Wait, let me just throw out there that just because of my background, I have lots of very stark and very vegetarian friends, and I have this hypothesis that this whole like literally eating like a meat and wine is just like a ploy by non-vegetarians to like make Jews not like force Jews to eat meat. It's a ploy by the OU to get the Biden.
The OU stuck it in the Gemara.
I actually did hope the OU
He was around in times of
Anyway.
It's a ploy by the OU to get the Biden kosher meat.
So we can discuss my opinions on texture companies later, but we are kind of running a little bit out of time, so we are going to move on to section 3. So section 3 talks about so the third problem that you can potentially run into is that the meat is not slaughtered and it's not salted, which you need to do to the meat in order to make it kosher. Kosher salt is called kosher salt for a reason because you cannot have it as a fine powder. It needs to be big flakes. So would anyone like to read source 1 in section 3? Miriam. Yeah.
If the place where the Lord has chosen to establish his name is too far from you, you may slaughter any of the sheep, the cattle or sheep that the Lord gives you, as I have instructed you, and you may eat to your heart's content in your settlement.
Okay. So, that is a place where it says that, like, if you want to eat meat, you gotta go kill it, very bluntly. So the next source is the Mishnah Torah. I'm just going to read this. It says, the biblical positive commandment is that if anyone wishes to eat the meat of cattle, beasts, or birds, he must first perform the rite of shechita. Only thereafter he may eat it as it is written, you shall slaughter any of your cattle or sheep. So the thing about lab-grown meat, like one of the big reasons that people are putting so much money and time and research into this is that you don't have to kill the animal. You can have an animal live a long time and, you know, everyone's been eating meat from the same animal and there's really no reason to kill it. So, one of the problems, therefore, is that this meat is not been killed and it's not been koshered. How much time do we have left?
14 minutes.
Okay.
Or as long as you want.
I mean, I don't want to keep people here.
You want to interview with you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, right?
I just have a few resumes.
Okay, so maybe Samson won't like this, but the next thing is a quote from OU Kosher. Sorry.
I was making a joke. I do not think this is a ploy. Just to be clear.
Okay,
You were all
I
laughing. I
understand.
thought you guys was a joke.
Samson, I think you should read.
Okay.
Samson, you want to read? Where it says at the top of page 4, kosher
There's a
slaughter.
lot of truth behind this joke.
Top of page 4.
Page 4.
Are you? Oh, you.
Alright, kosher slaughter's kata involves cutting the trachea and the esophagus with a sharp, flawless knife. At the same time, the cardio artery,
Carotid.
whatever, which are the primary supplier of blood to the brain, are severed. Profound loss in blood and massive drop in blood pressure render the animal insensate almost immediately. Studies done by Dr. H. Dukes at Cornell University School of Veterinary Medicine indicate that the animal is unkosher within seconds of the incision. OU kosher.
Thank you.
Mic drop.
So that is like how you would shecht or kill in English an animal, and since that is not how you derive cells, unless you got the chef attraction going on here, takes off. I really love that idea. But so that is like one of the big things, not even into like the whole koshering process of it. Again, Herbert.
No. I vetoed it.
You know what? Speak. I'll listen.
There is meat that you don't have to shecht if to be kosher. That's like ben bikuach meat. But it's really a debate about whether or not it's like a part of the animal or not. Like you don't need to shecht like a liver to eat liver. But the point is, this is made.
You have to
this is
shecht
also
where it
a
comes
remina
from.
chai.
Yeah, but you still have to kosher the liver.
Yeah, but you don't need to shecht it. Right, but there's a debate about whether or not a fetus that's mostly developed is part of the mother or if it's its own life form.
So I did not really find that is interesting. I did not really find anything in this realm about eating cow fetuses. I can do more research about that later. Maybe part 2 of this. I don't know. Miriam, did you have a question?
Like the Torah doesn't have they have no idea that you're going to be able to eat meat without killing the animal. Meaning, like, we're not going to eat. We're not going to just cut off a limb of a cow and eat it and have the cow just. Right. Well, that's another perspective. But like we have milk and that's like animal product and you don't need it. Well, you can't kill it to get milk from it. But like there's other animal products that we have from animals that is not the meat itself. And this isn't technically getting the meat itself. It's getting just like a molecule or not a molecule or whatever it is from it.
But you're extracting those cells and those molecules with the intention that it will become meat to eat. So when I was making this source sheet, I originally thought, like, is it worth mentioning? Like, is it shechted? Like, is it even minachai? All those things. It's just like, as you said, like those few little molecules. But then I thought, well, the intention is that this will become actual, like, full-fledged meat that you will eat, So I thought, yes, it does qualify as those things. Anyone else? We're all good. Okay. So for time's sake, I'm just gonna summarize this a little. So the next thing is not only is this lab-grown meat not shechted, but it's also not koshered. So because you can't eat the blood of an animal, you have to salt it, which is supposed to draw out all this blood with these gigantic flakes of salt. And then you have to wash it, and it needs to be soaked for a certain amount of time, and you can't soak it for, like, less or more, and it's all very, like, complicated. If you want to become a shochet in the future, I suggest you research it. Okay, I can,
There's actually a JLIC educator at University of Illinois. His name is Shlomo Schechter, and he's a no joke. And
Funniest thing I've ever heard.
And I asked him if they want to come for Shabbos as like Scotland. They like to travel. Scott, and he was like, "Yeah, what is there to shecht up in Binghamton?"
Deer farm.
The university would love him. Oh my god.
I'm like, deer. How do you feel about venison? And he was like, "Oh, it's amusing."
So, I met someone who
eats also a lot of
So I met someone who used to be a Hillel rabbi at Cornell a while ago, and I forget what we were talking about, but they said that they partnered with like some department in the university along with their like Judaic studies class that they were teaching, and they hosted like a chefing thing like out in the middle of the yard in Korea. Yeah, someone came and did that to my high school.
Or a hockey game.
I have a video if anybody wants to.
CABC took a ram and they shafted it before their hockey game against Vermont round.
Not the full story. Not the full story. But they brought it up as a mascot.
Wait, did they shot like properly?
Okay, so
Yeah, it was.
those New York area schools are intense. Can we all quiet down a bit?
Guys, decorum.
Actually, someone did come and do that to my school. They chefed a chicken in the middle of the cafeteria. Something went wrong and the chicken... Oh, yeah, some like vegan students led a protest. It was really funny. Good. So actually, like something went wrong and like the chicken wasn't edible and it was kind of like still flapping around in the cafeteria. Or in the academy.
That happens after regular stream though. The chicken still moves around for like a few seconds.
Yeah, but it was also in the middle of our school cafeteria, so...
You Rochester girls knew too.
I mean, we just have a lot of chickens around us all the time. Yeah, we live on farms.
I don't know. They did this in the middle of suburban Maryland.
Neighbors with chickens.
Our neighbors are chickens. Our neighbors
Okay.
Actually, people in my neighborhood do have chickens, but whatever. So this source from the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch 36. If you want to read that on your own, I suggest you do. But for time's sake, I'm trying to hurry this up a bit. So basically says like before you have to wash the meat, then you have to soak it, and you have to salt it, and all this stuff. And the product that comes from lab-grown meat basically looks like ground beef. So it's a little bit impossible to do that, nor has it been shechted. So, problem number 3, which is another big problem, you can't shech this, and you can't kosher it, so therefore it really wouldn't be considered kosher, aside from their business.
Wow.
So, the fourth thing I thought of was what part of the animal are cells derived from, because there are certain parts of a cow that you cannot eat. So would anyone like to read source 1 in part 4? You want to read? Knock it out. Yes, please.
That is why the children of Israel to this day do not eat the thigh muscle that is in the socket of the hip. Jacob's hip socket was wrenched from at the thigh muscle.
So, I actually only found one source in all of the things that came up on Google on lab-grown meat, and that one thing did say, the one thing I found about where they take the cells from, it did say the neck of an animal. I don't know if that's what all these companies do, but if cells are taken from a part of an animal that is kosher, so not the very rear end of an animal, and you can, get through all these loopholes, then I guess you could be on your way to making this a kosher thing. But that does not mean that that's what everyone is doing. And also, I forget what I was going to say. So, if you can take these cells from a kosher part of the animal, for example, the neck, then you're kind of one step on your way there. But that doesn't always mean that they do, or that doesn't always mean that's the most convenient place to take these cells from. Also, scientists do experiment with bone marrow, and the most easily accessible part for a lot of bone marrow to take the stem cells from is not usually the neck. So would anyone like to read the Gemara after? Sherbert.
The Gemara answers, even though the prohibition of eating sacrificial animals precedes the prohibition of eating the sciatic nerve, the prohibition of eating the sciatic nerves comes and takes effect upon the offspring of consecrated animals, because the prohibition of eating the sciatic nerve has an extra stringency in that it applies also to descendants of Noah. The prohibition of eating the sciatic nerve was in effect from the time Jacob wrestled with the angel before the Torah was given. At that time, Jacob and his sons had the status of descendants of Noah, i.e. Gentiles. Therefore, the prohibition of eating the sciatic nerve is broader than the prohibition of eating meat of the sacrificial animal, which took effect only when the Torah was given.
So this Gemara goes to explain a little bit behind the prohibition of eating meat past the sciatic nerve. So that is kind of the end of the 4 problems that I wanted to present to you. So just a little recap. The first kind of hurdle you have to get over, is this a kosher animal? And since here we're talking about kosher beef, cows are kosher if shechted properly and everything. So you kind of check box 1, but then you go into does it violate Ever Minachai? And in this case it would, is because you are, or Basar Minachai, I think you pointed that out, is because you are taking cells from a live animal for the purpose of growing them to eat them. While that little biopsy you take from a cow may not look like, steak then, wait a bit and it will become one in the future. So it does violate Eber Minachai. Then you go on to the meat isn't shechted and it's not kosher. And you can't shecht this kind of meat because that's not really what science is moving towards in this situation, because the point is to make this really a sustainable thing, because the population is on track to grow very rapidly very soon, and there is kind of a looming problem of how do we produce enough food for the population without continuing to harm the environment. And this is one of the very prominent solutions, is that you can make meat for a bunch of people without having to kill a bunch of animals and without having to sustain all these animals that take up all this land, all this food that you could, all these plants and all this water. So therefore, since it's not shechted and you can't kosher it, therefore that is you wouldn't really be kosher. And problem number 4 is, which isn't really such as big of one, is what part of the animal is this taken from. So if you take it from an animal, that is kosher, and it is from a part of the animal that is kosher, you're kind of, leaning in the right direction, but that's not always the case, and that's not always the right place to get the correct amount of cells. So thank you everyone for listening.